Um, Sammie, so excited to have you as our first ever guest on this interview series. You have a background formally as a founder. You started your own company in college. You also worked in product, spending time at Goldman Sachs, and you're currently a fellow early career investor at TechNexus. So
Yep.
super excited to dive in today, and thanks for being here.
Yeah. Happy to chat. Excited to go through some cool questions.
Awesome. So I kind of wanted to start with your kind of career in college and thinking through, what did you study? What was your journey at Georgia Tech? And did you always know that you wanted to go into venture kind of as you were going through your undergrad?
Yeah. I've definitely lived quite a few lives when it comes to different roles I've done and things I've studied. I went to college at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and I was basically doing biomedical engineering there and really wanted to do that because I saw a way to marry innovation with the health space. Originally wanted to be doctor and then realized I don't really care that much for the day to day of a doctor, really the innovation side. So biomedical engineering seemed like a good fit. While in school, I started a company that really was focused on innovating different products for women in the menstrual space and kind of did a few iterations of that. So on one hand, throughout school, I was doing that. And then on the other hand, I was also trying to get actual industry experience to figure out what it is I wanted to do. So my junior year, I did one semester off to work at Abbott Labs in California. There, I was doing manufacturing engineering and really learned a lot from that experience, but came out of it realizing like industry and the typical path for a biomedical engineer was not what I wanted to do. So when I came back, I kind of reassessed and realized, you know what, like for me, I am a junior. It makes sense to just continue with the degree, get that degree, and then pivot. But most people and some people kind of considered at that point, like maybe I switched to a different program altogether. So I just decided it was best for me. So then again, throughout all that, was doing my own thing on the side. I've always just liked to keep busy. Went through a few iterations of like lab tested products that never got anywhere, and then did an actual consumer product called B Case, and that was a birth control pill case attached to the back of your phone. So that was really fun. So doing all of those different things while working at programs and internships and going to school. So definitely kept me busy. And then my summer going into my fifth year, I would say. So Georgia Tech, it's pretty common to do 5 years. And I took that semester off, so I was extended. And I had an opportunity to either go to Procter and Gamble and do another like manufacturing esque role, or had a random opportunity to do operations at Goldman Sachs. And I thought, you know what, I'll probably position myself best if I just get a lot of experience in different areas and kind of remove myself from that biomedical engineering route as much as I can, just to give myself flexibility. So I ended up going to Salt Lake City, working at Goldman Sachs there. Learned a lot about how to work at a big company, and how to communicate across various stakeholders, etc. And then when I was graduating, I had the opportunity to either A, try to do my startup full time, or B, go to a role at Goldman Sachs and just try that out of college. So I ended up putting the startup aside. I can definitely get into that later of kind of what I thought to get there. But I ended up moving to Chicago, working at Goldman in a product management role. All that to say is I've done a lot of different things, and I'm now doing something that has virtually nothing to do with my degree. So it's kind of funny to see how things work out that way.
Totally. Yeah. And I love that you talk about kind of finding your path and it being okay to try different things because I remember when I was in college, I felt so much pressure to know exactly what I wanted to do as the perfect internship that would lead to like the perfect first job out of college.
Yep.
But I feel like college now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was such a great time for me to explore. And I'm almost glad that I didn't put myself on one linear
Yep.
path, you know? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I
And
feel
actually, really quick on that, what's interesting is I know that there are a lot of schools that are very competitive and like who has the best internship at X, Y, and Z firm, whatever. I had that atmosphere. I think that there's good and bad to it. It drives you to work as hard as you can, but there is that level of comparison, and you feel invalidated or less than if you don't get XYZ internship. And it's actually funny. And in the moment, you don't feel this, but looking back, a lot of the people that work at these top tier firms, like maybe you don't like it. And then it's all of this competition and feeling less than when it's like, okay, you have a great job maybe that you love versus you could have worked at maybe a top firm and you hate it. Like I think that it just goes to show there's a path for everyone, and like no one should feel invalidated which path they go down. But that's certainly something that I think is pretty prevalent, and I've learned like looking back, like it doesn't really matter the name as long as you learned a lot and like what you're doing.
Totally, it's so true. And in 10 years, no one's gonna
Yeah.
care how much internship you
Yeah.
had when you were in college. I feel like it's more helpful just to know what you like and don't like than
Hmm.
the perfect that were consulting, banking, VC
Yep.
internship when you're so young in your career. And also, people really hear that you started your own company when you were in school. I feel like that is, I mean, where I'm from, the Bay Area, it tends to be a path some students go down, but not everyone, across the country. And I feel like it's very unique to be able to have worked different internships, also started your own company now in venture. But would love to hear more about your experience as a founder while still being in school, and kind of how you came up with the idea. I know obviously the women's health space is an extremely underserved space in terms of
Hmm.
innovation. And we just love to hear more about that experience.
Yeah, sure. I loved every single minute I spent on that company. It was called Medsur. I don't know why I picked that name. I think actually what happened was my first product I worked on was way too specific of a name. So when I pivoted away, I had to do like a full rebrand, and I learned I'll pick a generic name just to just to give myself some flexibility. So yeah, I worked on that for a long time. I have always just been like super entrepreneurial, and I like to keep busy. So once I get passionate about something, I will do like anything in my free time to just develop those skills, learn, etc. So when I started, I realized like one, there's a huge fear in my mind of toxic shock syndrome and tampon use. So with my biomedical engineering experience, I did a few internships and like semesters at a really cool lab at Georgia Tech and Emory, essentially just using different stem cells and various coatings to really improve like heart failure, et cetera, and all these different things. So through that, I just got introduced to the more chemical side and the actual like true like lab test side, and came up with this idea to put a coating on a tampon that would eliminate the risk of toxic shock syndrome. So it was a really cool experience. I got to work with the Georgia Tech lab. Like they just let me have some space. Georgia Tech paid for a lot of my materials to let me explore it, and then actually got some really good results that the things like the mixtures we were creating did prevent adhesion on cotton. So at that point, I was like, great, I have a cool product. One, it would require years of FDA testing, so it wasn't anywhere near done, but had a point where a mentor was like, you need to like validate this first. You can't just build something. You need to really understand, is this the problem that people want solved? So went to the streets of Atlanta and spoke to about 250 or 300 women. And it was really embarrassing and uncomfortable to stop people and ask them about their menstrual health. But I did that and was surprised to hear that out of the 250, 300 people, maybe two people even mentioned toxic shock syndrome when I just asked, what's your biggest concern? So that was an eye-opening moment of you can create really cool tech, but if there's not a market for it, there's not a market for it. So really the importance of customer discovery. Through that, I found out that about 75% of people had concerns with actual leakage of products. So pivoted to that space, and then ultimately hit a blocker of just design. It was hard to do, and that would also require FDA. So um, didn't want to go down that path in college. That was a choice that I made. I could spend a lot of time on school, on this, on internships, but I knew that there was going to be a natural blocker of how much time I could actually put forth something. So then ultimately found this really cool problem space of a lot of my friends. I'd be around them and their alarm would go off to take their birth control pill. And surely enough, there was no pill there. We were out, we were busy, and they would either skip it or we'd have to go home and get it. And I kept noticing this and was like, this is a big problem. Like, why does this keep happening? So with all that I'd learned, I first just took to customer discovery and talked to, I think with that one also like 200 women of like, what are your biggest concerns with birth control? And if they said forgetting to take the pill, it's like, okay, well, what is the primary reason you forget, etc. And then sort of got really validated. This is a problem. So I ended up building a product that attached to your birth control pills to your phone case. So when your alarm goes off, your pills are always there. So ultimately got that one out, commercialized that all while in college. It was a really cool experience. And then like I guess a cautionary tale of it, what I learned was there is this fear as a founder that someone's going to beat you to it. I think that that's a fair feeling to have, but by no means should you be rushing your process and cutting corners or not being as thorough just to be the first. I think like being, I guess, learning from that and like seeing companies nowadays, I think it's really like honestly, no one cares too much until you prove that there's value there. So it's like you might think it's great, but they don't care until there's a market. So I ended up making design calls. I really wish I hadn't. I invested in tooling that wasn't exactly what I needed just to get it out there. And ultimately hit a point where I'm like, wow, I have this great idea, but the actual execution of the product is missing it. And that's when I had to decide, you know, I had to shut this down because now that I'm going into a full-time role, I can't do a full redesign and start this company from the beginning. So I think it was an incredible experience. I learned so much. Frankly, it's helped me with job interviews and show that I have experience beyond a typical first year out of college graduate at that point. So it was a really great experience. I think I just learned so much, so I don't have any regrets. And yeah, I learned so much that I would never do again. But I prioritized balancing that with school. It didn't feel like a job. I just always wanted to work on it.
I love that. And it's awesome to hear all your learning throughout the process. And I feel like that's an experience that you can't really get without going through it and doing it. And I also really love hearing the why behind your mission. I know a lot of female contraceptives are actually created by men, and it's a huge
Hmm.
problem in the industry. And the fact that you wanted to tackle it, you're like, I see a problem. I hear my friends talking about it, and I want to be the person to go
Yeah.
tackle this is incredible. And I also love, I think some kind of learning to takeaways that you mentioned are, not having that fear of someone being it. I heard somewhere that that's like one of the top reasons people don't pursue their startup ideas because they're worried, I don't want to share it. I don't want to work with
Yeah.
people on it because someone's going to take it, or it's going to get started and people kind of are done before they even begin.
Yep.
And then also love like the talking to customers. You mentioned like getting on the ground and talking to women, like going out and just like kind of cold, just starting conversations
Yeah.
is incredible. Uh, so sounds like such an incredible experience. And I'm curious how that then translated to joining Goldman Sachs, working on the operation side. I know you were doing tech product related work for them. Why did you decide to kind of take that step to Goldman Sachs? And it's a company so many people, especially our age, want to work for.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing what your experience is like there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. I made that decision because I figured I really needed to just get experience in a true corporate position to understand and like I had a hunch that I could never be in corporate. That just wasn't going to be the right path for me. I wouldn't feel like happy enough or innovative enough, etc. So I had to test that. I was like, let me just go do it, and I could be surprised or I could be validated. So the reason I actually took a gamble in this role with Goldman was it was in a group that was a startup acquired by Goldman Sachs about 6 years prior. So it's still somewhat operated as a startup under the umbrella of Goldman Sachs. So to me, that was intriguing of, okay, I can learn a lot about a startup, but have the safety net of Goldman Sachs. That's pretty rare as a startup to have a safety net like that. Um, One, I think it's interesting to have a safety net. You see that there's certain decisions that you don't have to make. You don't have to be scrappy. And that could lead to like be a detriment of innovation of you don't you can almost like get ever flowing pocket. So that was kind of why I picked it. And my experience was like really interesting, and I really don't regret my time there. I learned so much. Given it was like a startup, it was very, very active. Like my first few weeks as an analyst, I was leading meetings with managing directors and already like had no product experience whatsoever in the digital space, and was already like leading entire like dev teams, like all cross stakeholder teams on building out like the features and what you need, the timelines to get these accomplished. I was doing things I have no idea how to do. So it was very much a trial by fire situation, which I think I thrive in most of the time. Is okay, like let me just give it a shot. Um, so I hit a point there where I was just becoming more and more validated. Like I thought it was really interesting work. It was really fast paced, but I really just didn't want to be in corporate. It wasn't a fit for me. Just because some bureaucracy, like you need it, and I just prefer to like move quickly and not have all these checks sometimes. So had a good opportunity to leave and join TechNexus where I am now, but really like a great experience. I think that I learned like within my year there, I feel like I learned like 2 or 3 years worth of like learnings, experience, etc. Like I just got to really be in charge and be a leader. And like huge takeaways were how to communicate to various stakeholders with very different goals and timelines, and how to like navigate and manage all these differing motivations. I think that was a huge thing, especially going into anything in the venture ecosystem when there's a lot of different players at stake and you need to like really be mindful of timelines and pushing things forward. And learn to like, I think being overly communicative is way better than not. So that was a big thing, is just really communicating clearly like what was discussed, what the next steps are, leave any room for people to say like, I have feedback, a question, I disagree, whatever. But I think I learned a lot about how to be a good communicator. So I loved my time there. It just like, wasn't going to be a fit for me. And I knew like I validated that I think the venture ecosystem was much more my speed.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's such a pertinent point that you mentioned. Just it's a great experience to have working for a really big company. So my first internship experience was at Oracle, which is,
Mm-hmm.
similar. It's a huge 100,000 person company. And on one
Yeah.
end, it's great to see how decisions are made. And a lot of it is like political. There are a lot of different, kind of factors that go into getting a project,
Yeah.
getting funding. And I think it's really helpful to just see how a big company is run. But then at the same time, it's like, say you're someone early in your career, for your work to get seen a lot of times, it has to go through your boss, who then has to prove it with his boss or her boss, and then it
Yeah.
keeps going. Um, and it is sometimes difficult to feel like you're having
Oh yeah.
impact. But I
Yeah.
think it's always interesting because, a lot of current students or recent grads ask me, should I go the big company route, or should I go smaller? And I feel like it is helpful to have both experiences and just
Mm-hmm.
done it at some point. Um, and you mentioned then kind of transitioning into what, from my experience, is a much less structured role in venture
Mm-hmm.
capital, especially
Yeah.
early in your career. It tends to be not micromanaged. You have more freedom over your schedule, um, freedom over your projects, and would love to hear just about maybe starting with what TechNexus does. I know you're a unique firm in that you have a lot of large corporate partners, kind of like us at the Western
Mm-hmm.
Group. And we'd love to hear kind of first more about the firm and the investment.
Yeah. Yeah. So TechNexus is a Chicago-based venture firm. We invest globally in early stage companies, and where we're unique is we partner with Fortune 1000, 2000 entities that typically don't have a corporate venture arm, and we'll invest alongside them in early stage companies that align to certain investment themes we help them identify. So we do operate as a true venture firm, but we frame it more as a venture collaborative where we're doing sourcing, we conduct intro calls, we go through diligence, but we are having a lens of our corporate partners. Um, how can they work with this company? Is it strategically beneficial for both sides? We really just want to create these bespoke venture ecosystems around the corporate that help them keep their finger on the pulse of early stage innovation without having to go an acquisition route. It really allows some flexibility and innovation that might not be as doable without this model. So we're really hands-on. Every investment we make will collaborate near term or far term with the corporate partner that invested in them. And we have a whole team dedicated to bridge that gap between the two parties. So we really walk the walk of making sure they work together. We help flesh out these different collaboration strategies. We oversee them. And we're really just champions for our portfolio and our corporate partners and are always thinking strategically, how can this work? But like I said, we are like operate as a venture firm as well. So we do our own financial diligence. We are looking for financial investments, but the caveat is there has a strategic lens as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting model. I personally was drawn to it because of my startup experience when I was interacting with some big pharma companies and really firsthand experience how difficult it is to be a founder trying to interact with a corporation, both on like a timeline perspective, just like responsiveness, how to pitch the right message to them and have it resonate. We as TechNexus really help like be the mediator for that. And that like really is what drew me here.
Totally. And I love that it's kind of a plug and play solution. Like it kind of goes back to what we just talked about for large corporations, sometimes it's hard to get new initiatives off the ground, like to have kind of a pulse of this like startup fast-paced ecosystem when it requires so many approvals internally and it's a very structured kind of organization. Whereas venture, we
Yeah.
know it's like deals pop up out of nowhere. And sometimes
Yeah.
you'll see a deal and you need to sprint and have something approved and get a term sheet week. And it tends to be maybe a little bit of a different model. Um, and it's very similar to what we do at the Wesley Group too. And I think
Yeah.
it is really cool as someone early in their career to have that experience working with really big companies on one end, and then also working
Mm-hmm.
with startups and founders kind of just starting out on the other end. So you kind of get to see all these different pieces of the
Yeah.
innovation ecosystem. Um, Curious to hear what your kind of day to day looks like as an investor at TechNexus, and maybe just like what a typical schedule looks like for you. And I know that it can vary widely depending on the week
Yeah.
in deep diligence of the company. But I think people would love to hear kind of a sense of what it looks like at the day.
Yeah, of course. So as an analyst, me and my colleague really manage the top of funnel sourcing. So I would say like 60% or more of our role is dedicated to finding companies that align to our various investment theses. So I leverage different avenues and channels like newsletters, co-investors, accelerators. I love Google Alerts for keywords. I think there's really interesting news articles that come up for that identify like startups you might not see otherwise. And there's just like so many different channels, but I leverage a lot of those channels. I do like my own research and like sourcing sprints, as we call them, of just finding a lot of different companies in a particular space. So I spend most of my day doing that, and then I have that level of autonomy once I finished like initial few months and got a little more familiar with how to make a gut call on a company. So I have that autonomy to decide, okay, like do we add this to our CRM and leave it just to watch, or do we think it's worth a call to learn a little bit more? So then I will reach out, set up a call, learn more about the company, and then kind of keep pushing it along, get feedback from my team, etc. So that's kind of how that beginning of the process looks on my day to day. And then I also support with diligence all the way through investment, whether that be building out a qualitative memo to build our conviction on an investment, building out a financial model to understand like where we think the company will be going at XYZ. Um, Really just getting to the nitty gritty of the business and building out that case. So I support that. And then given our model with all these corporates, we do a good bit of just ad hoc projects, like research projects. Just any way we can support and learn more about the business, we do so. So there could be a bunch of other random stuff. And then the last part of my day, typically I'm pretty involved in our like DEI initiatives internally at TechNexus and improving our investing metrics, et cetera. So I work on that and I'm pretty data driven there of looking through our CRM and our funnel and how we can improve those sort of metrics. So I think like that's like the typical day to day, but what's exciting about this kind of role, like you said, is the level of autonomy and really building up your schedule. So a lot of the days, like you are networking with other co-investors and building those relationships, and it's a really cool job to be able to just go on a coffee chat and learn more about someone and their fun and what they're excited about and build those relationships. And then there also is a level of autonomy to get involved in the community. So I do a lot of different um, networks and communities focused on underrepresented founders and funders, and I really like am appreciative my job enables me to do that.
Totally. And I think it's something that's super unique about venture too. There are very few roles other than maybe being a founder where you can completely kind of control your own schedule and you're not micromanaged in any way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think also what's cool is that if you bring in a deal, like you said, like you can do diligence on it and you kind of bring that deal through the entire process rather than
Yep.
sending it to somebody else. And I know it varies kind of from firm to firm, but I
Exactly.
think there are kind of a lot of parallels too. Again, going back to your founding experience with, hey, like a partner wants to look into this space, the firm wants to look into this space, like Michaela, Sammie, go, like figure it out,
Yeah.
find the best deals, and you'll bring them all the way through to the term sheet, which I think is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yep.
And I know you also put out a lot of really cool pieces in the climate and sustainability space. I know that's a space you're really passionate about and TechNexus has been looking into. Could you talk more about kind of trends you're seeing in the space and maybe just thoughts generally on the climate investment?
Yeah, I think it's a super exciting space. I became really interested in it about a year ago. I had no idea about anything really mobility or transportation until I started working here. And then I was brought onto a deal a year ago, a company called Harbinger that's doing electric chassis for the medium duty space. And it was just a light bulb moment for me of I can leverage my engineering like experience. Like I love engineering from like a math and like critical thinking perspective. I just didn't like it in the health space. So it was the first one I was like, wow, like there's an application for engineering mixed with the venture capital investor technology itself from like an engineering hat. Um, so became really interested in sustainable mobility as a whole. And really where I like to focus and like trends I'm excited about are like one, off-grid energy and microgrids. I think anything that reduces reliance on the grid, especially as more electric vehicles are coming on the grid and just capacity is really, really being constrained. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for like virtual power plants and all these various different energy assets to be leveraged to support the grid as it needs to expand a little bit and also remove that resilient or reliance on it. So I think that space is super exciting. And then within that, I think the vehicle to grid is just the most intriguing thing to me of leveraging a battery on wheels as a revenue generating asset or an energy savings asset. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Um, and especially with my space, we work in the RV sector, and RVs are really underutilized. So there will be a huge battery just sitting stationary most of the year. And there's a super interesting opportunity with leveraging that or an electric boat. Like these vehicles or like I guess tangential automotive, really interesting use case for these underutilized vehicles. I think there's something there. But I think within that, with the grid, there's certain blockers that will slow down innovation there or at least adoption. And it's one, the grid has to, like the utility has to upgrade in order to accept this energy and increase capacity on their lines. So that could be like improving transformer boxes. Like that requires money that doesn't come from nowhere. So that's a challenge. And then even if they do upgrade it, you're still kind of at the helm of the utility of do they want to pay you or accept your extra energy. They might not be upgraded to support that. So I think where I see like the vehicle to grid space is almost like a first step vehicle to house. You power your home off your vehicle or your energy assets. And then as the utility catches up, if they want to, then you could shift to the grid. So I think there's a lot of different flexibility in that space that I'm excited about. Um, so those are like the big ones I really love. And then I think Thing with zero emission vehicles, whether that's hydrogen. I know we were briefly talking before this a little about ammonia and how that can feed into a hydrogen fuel cell. I think that there's a super interesting space there. And what I'm also always keeping in mind is that there's a right use case for all these technologies. So maybe hydrogen is a great use case for maritime shipping or heavy duty trucking or aviation, but maybe it's not the best use case for a passenger vehicle. Maybe batteries are just the best use case there. And it's like thinking through what technology fits where, but also like understanding I'm not an expert. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I think it shouldn't fit there, but it does. So I think those are like trends I'm super excited about, interested in. Really anything sustainable mobility is where I am just excited and want to continue learning.
For sure. And I think it's so cool being on the investment side too, because we're seeing these innovations, whether it's grid innovation, zero emission goals, kind of before they hit the market. And we know that
Mm-hmm.
pretty much all of the large OEMs, large automakers like the Audis, Fords are committing to completely electric vehicles being manufactured by whether it's 2030, 2035. And it's something
Yeah.
that will affect the lives of everyone who owns a car going forward and
Yeah.
kind of being able to see that tech early on. And I think something else you said was just finding that almost like creativity to not only find solutions that are going to create financial returns, but also that are climate friendly and net
Mm-hmm.
zero. And I think climate investing is unique in that you have to have both sides to it, not just necessarily financial returns. And
Yep.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on kind of this. I think it's been maybe a criticism of climate tech, especially back in 2008, 2009, the clean tech 1.0 boom and bust, where people feel like you kind of have to have this trade off between something that's sustainable and like these kind of impact investments and then financial returns. I'm curious to hear your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on this because clearly TechNexus is a fund that's focused on not just like the partnerships with the corporations, but also like they want to get returns. They want to see that like financial return
Yeah.
as well. I'm curious your thoughts on that kind of trade-off.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because what I'm noticing now, all of these regulations and laws being put in place by the administrations are forcing enterprises to care. So now you're creating actual markets where like these enterprises need climate innovation, whether it's carbon tracking, reducing carbon footprint, all these things like they're being really held responsible now of even like I know it's been pushed back a little bit, but like SB 253 and 261 in California, which are requiring all public and private entities over 1 billion in gross revenue to disclose all scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Until now, like scope 3, it's great if you do it. Most enterprises don't track that. It's hard to track. And some of them don't want consumers to know how much they're emitting through their supply chain. So it's interesting now that there's regulation coming along that will require them to do so. These companies, whereas before might be viewed as just like good in nature, helpful for the environment. Now they have actual markets and they people will need to be using this product. So I think that's creating an interesting opening. And just like to I don't think ever that these climate companies, and again, I'm like newer to this space, but I just don't believe that there was never like there's always a financial motivation. There's still businesses. Like I think that there was opportunity to generate a lot of revenue. It's just like, yeah, maybe the companies didn't care enough. But now I think it's just being highlighted. These have always been like good investments, but now even more so, like to someone who doesn't care about climate, like now, like it's apparent this is a good investment even from a business model. So I think it's like, in my opinion, just becoming more mainstream of like, yeah, like this is like good for the environment and good for financial returns. Um, so I think something that, like a cautious thing that I'm aware of in this space is as much as regulation is pushing this forward and like grant incentives and all these different things, there is the risk of like an administration change and now there's like things being defunded and how could that impact growth and the market. And I think what I try to remember is, and like when I'm talking to founders, understand like worst case scenario support for this space is gone from a government perspective and regulation perspective. How do you keep growing? Like how do you adjust? How do you navigate? Because I think solely relying on certain grants, if you're a domestic battery company or if you're building an electric vehicle, like if these go away, what does that mean to you? So I think that there's a lot of support, and that's making it more mainstream, but that's also could be temporary. So thinking through that as well.
Totally. Yeah. And it is interesting how driven like investment and innovation space is by policy. And I think that's something really unique about the climate space. And in the last 4 or 5 years, I feel like it's almost been a positive because with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, now there are billions of dollars kind of going towards these
Yeah.
climate friendly incentives. And you look at the chart of the funding and companies raising rounds, you see kind of like the mainstream, maybe like cryptos, like fintech, kind of going up and down with trends. And then
Yeah.
climate, which is kind of steadily on the rise and has been one of
Yeah.
the most stable technologies, interestingly.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really, really interesting to kind of follow the space. And we know that it's a direction the world has to take. And
Yeah. Exactly.
it's really cool to be able to see this tech kind of
Yeah.
before it hits the market.
Yeah.
But I do want to kind of switch gears and ask a
Hmm.
few questions kind of about like general career and kind of your experience so far being early in VC. And I know it's something kind of I've experienced as well, where most people in venture capital are, 5, 10 plus years out in their career, maybe even beyond. They've been on the operating side of things, or they've been consulting finance for, many years before
Yeah.
joining VC. So I'm curious to hear your experience as someone who started VC relatively early in your career, and if there are any kind of learnings or things you can share about that, because I know it's a pretty unique experience.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is it really is viewed as an apprenticeship kind of role where you just simply learn by doing. And what's hard is when you're new and you're looking at all these companies, it's really like, how do I know if this is a good idea or not? Like, I'm not an expert in semiconductors. I'm not an expert in like steel manufacturing. There's so many things that I'm like, how am I qualified to make this choice? Um, and sure, when you start, you rely on your peers, your colleagues to give you some thoughts when you come across companies. But even still now, a year and a half in, sometimes I'm like, okay, like maybe my gut is wrong. Like I need to be more thorough before I make a quick decision. So I think really the hardest thing to the transition was just this idea of like building conviction when you don't have the repetition to validate or support that. It's like, yeah, I haven't seen at that point 10,000 companies and 10,000 business models and financial models to understand like how is this different? What are the red flags? And like, am I missing something? So I think even now I still struggle with like, okay, like this sounds really cool to me, but like, is it a good business? Like, what are the questions I need to be asking? So that's what's great is now I run a lot of the calls independently, but time and time again, like I'll have a colleague on it with me, and it's really great to hear the questions they're asking. It's like, okay, like maybe I didn't think that was a question, and then the next time I know to ask it. So you kind of like build up off of that. So I think it was, honestly a harder transition than I thought. I've always been like a trial by fire person, but this one was hard because it wasn't here's everything you need to learn. Now just go do it. It's like you need to do trial by fire with literally like limited guidance because every company is different, every process is different. And I think it's a really unique position of you have to really trust yourself. And even though as an analyst, you're not a decision maker, you still need to be building up your own personal conviction with every deal you look at, regardless if it continues down the process of diligence. It's really like working on those muscles and building that muscle of repetition of, all right, this is why I believe in it. Here are the factors I'm like really banking on, and then getting feedback. So you learn and learn and learn. So yeah, I think it's a tough position sometimes because you really have to trust yourself. And if you don't know a lot and you're new, that's hard to do. So, but I think you learn so much by that. So it's good.
For sure. And something I've noticed too is that even at the partner level, there's still kind of new industries emerging and new technologies. And something that gave me more confidence is seeing, oh, hey, even the partners at our firm are taking the time to read research into new areas.
Yeah.
And they very much still have this curiosity and learning
Yeah.
mindset. and realizing that, okay, even though we're earlier in our careers, still, it's not going to change. Like everyone's still learning in the space. And I do think
Yeah.
it's a challenge to, like you mentioned, kind of with asking all the questions and knowing the right questions to ask. And sometimes it's not like school where it's a quiz, like you get all the
Yeah.
answers, right? Like in venture, even if you make an investment, it's still not guaranteed that the investment's going to do well. It's the
Exactly.
market. So it's like you're
Yeah.
never going to have all of the right information. And I think that's where like this willingness to just continuously be learning and know, like, is this a risk that we think is worth it to take? Like it's not even like,
Yep.
okay, we make the right investment, we know right away it was the right one. It's like it's going to take
Yep.
7 to 10 years to realize it was the right one. So I feel
Exactly.
like structure of venture kind of necessitates that like learning mindset. And yeah, I think it's a super interesting career to be in early in your career for that
Yeah.
too. I did want to, I know I could talk for hours about
Yeah.
all of this, but I did want to move to some questions that we actually received for you from the newsletter
Yep.
audience. So our first question is coming from Min, who is currently a student at Case Western. And she asked, can you please elaborate on TechNexus Venture's business model and what it means by investing in relationships between leading corporations and ambitious entrepreneurs to rethink growth? Great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's again a really cool model in the sense that we're not just making venture investments and supporting our portfolio companies with maybe investor introductions, customer introductions. We're really on the front lines with these corporate partners to create collaboration thesis and all these different things. So kind of what we do is when we sign on that corporate partner, we typically do like 6-ish months of almost consultative work of just really understanding the business and thinking through like what problems they have, what areas of innovation could be interesting for them. So we're really going straight to the source and then taking those ideas and those themes and going to find companies that could help them either answer that through a co-development lens or a supplier vendor lens or co-marketing. Like there are so many various things that we do. And that's what's really interesting about it. So I think it gets rethinking growth in the sense that a typical corporate doesn't have to acquire an early stage company to learn all these things. We're allowing them to get some skin in the game early and collaborate with the startup. And it also is beneficial for the startup. They could have like an automatic customer, they could have co-marketing efforts with a huge enterprise. Like there are a lot of benefits to both sides. And I think we're just a really hands-on service and team that builds a really meaningful relationships with all parties to make sure that we can make some collaboration happen that's well worth it and exciting for everyone. So it's a pretty unique model. And like I said, we really try to keep that lens of both financial and strategic because at the end of the day, we are a firm looking for returns. And something might be a perfect fit from a strategic lens, but maybe we just don't believe it's the right investment. So we have like the autonomy there to make that decision.
I love that. And I love that it's really keeping in mind what's best for the company and the entrepreneur. And it's like, hey, if
Mm-hmm.
the best path forward is to have you partner with one of our strategic investors, we're going to do that. We're not going to try to go down a path because of, the potential investment return or because we want to get a better price on the deal.
Yep,
Very much geared towards being a teammate. And I think that
exactly.
the cool things about venture is that it's one of those industries where everyone can win. Like if an
Yep,
investment does well and you're helping the entrepreneur throughout the life cycle of the company, the investor benefits, the entrepreneur benefits, and your LPs and partners also
exactly.
benefit. So it's not
Yeah,
like you have to be having a trade-off between those.
yeah, yeah. It's literally to your own benefit as an investor to support your portfolio because, like you're saying, yeah, if you help them to get a new investor or to get a new customer or get like I don't know, an industry introduction, like that is directly benefiting and improving and growing their business, which is therefore improving in the theory the value of their business. Like it is just you have complete control in a sense of giving the startup everything it needs to potentially have a good exit. Like it's beneficial for everyone to support.
And I think that's one of the things that drew me to venture too and being
Yeah,
on the buy side is that you can have kind of all of those positives coming out of a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question. So we have two questions, both from Peter, who is currently a student at Pomona College. The first question, this is a good one, is what is your hottest take as a VC?
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about this one.
It's a great question.
I think it is a good question, and I don't think I've thought about it too much before. I would say like my hunch is going in two directions. One is like a deal flow sense of deal flow is great, but if it's just like very transactional, then like I think it boils down to building those strong relationships because the strong relationships you have and you actually like the people, then deals coming your way are probably more relevant and it's just easier. They come to mind. It's a more natural flow. I think a lot of this industry is just like getting deals wherever you can, but sometimes it's not worth the time if you like don't click with the person or you don't fully understand their thesis, etc. So I think like when you first meet someone or go to an event, it's like okay, deal flow, deal flow, deal flow. When I talk to someone, I'd rather be like, hey, like let's catch up quarterly and let me know how I can help you. Like I'll send you cool articles and resources versus like, hey, let's just share deal flow. So I feel like that's like a lot of first instinct of conversations is to do that, but I think that there's a lot more value to be provided and extracted to like sending articles of interest. Like if I sent you an article of like electrification, I think we'd have a much better conversation than being like, here's like 10 deals, like let me know what you think. Like sometimes that's great, but I don't know. I'm a little more skeptical on that. I'm more like quality over quantity. So I'd say like that is kind of them rolled up. And then the other one I kind of mentioned already is I think it's like really funny to think like really knows what they're doing. Like no matter how senior you are and experienced you are, you don't really know what you're doing and you're learning. And you can think you made the best decision possible and the company goes like belly up in I don't know, 2 years. Like it's interesting and I guess it's not a hot take as much of an observation that it's like no one really is an expert per se.
It was so
But
true.
no, that's a hard question. I don't know if you thought about your own hot takes.
That was great. No, and I definitely agree on the relationship building side. And I do think it's it's probably like you said, more of an observation, but it's also more fun to build genuine relationships. And it's like I know you like Sammie, you'll like comment on my LinkedIn posts and like hype me up, and then I'll send you like deals that are relevant or like things
Yeah,
that make me think of you. And it's way more fun to have relationships like that than like what can I get out of this person? And I think you quickly find like people who you vibe more with, like in the ecosystem. And what you said about kind of being a beginner and not feeling like you know everything, like it's definitely an industry that humbles you because on paper, a company can check every box and have the
yeah,
team and maybe like the market isn't ready or there's some turn like COVID killed so many businesses and there's just no
yeah.
way to certain things that are going to happen. So I feel like it definitely is an industry that kind of keeps you on your toes for that reason.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely I always have the perspective of how can I most help people, and
Yeah.
yeah, I do kind of love that it's like a team oriented kind of industry and
Hmm.
it's how you work with entrepreneurs, and then both of our firms having those corporate partners, like it's just cool to be able to work together with stakeholders and not
Yeah.
in a space where you have to try to like sell a company or like try to inflate certain things to sell a company at a certain price or
Yeah.
it doesn't have like that negative incentive structure, which I think is
Exactly.
um but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great question. And I wanted to end with this last question. This
Hmm.
is such an awesome conversation. And last question from Peter is what's the best decision you made on your career slash life journey and any advice for college.
Yeah. I think the best decision I've made leaving my original educational path and like being comfortable with the idea of like wasting quote unquote all those years and those experiences and just like kind of taking educated calculated risk to try something new and giving myself options. I think that like I could have very easily said like I'll just stick to the manufacturing engineering space and maybe do that at a different kind of sector, but I was like no, let me take a risk and do something completely different that I might hate just to give myself optionality. I think that's like a big thing is give yourself options to one, learn what you don't like we said earlier. Like that's more valuable than figure out what you do like. It's like, okay, I know I don't want to do this. And two, it gives you like that experience and confidence if you were to apply for a job that is completely out of your typical expertise. Like you have the confidence to know, like, if I could do biomedical engineering here, manufacturing engineering there, and operations and product, like you could probably figure out any role. Like I think it gives you the confidence. Um, so I think that is like a big thing. And it's funny when even now, I'm like in my own career thinking through like various paths you can go down, and I find myself more like a risk averse now. And then I look back and I'm like, wow, like I didn't even think I was taking risks before. I was just kind of following my gut. So it kind of goes to show like things just work out if you like trust your gut, and obviously don't make decisions out of left field with no basis to it. But if you've thought through like, okay, doing this could allow XYZ door to open, then like sure, like that is probably a decent idea or path to go down. So I think that is like forgotten the whole question. The other question is advice, right?
Yeah. And I think
Okay.
it kind of goes back to what you said
Yeah.
too, because what I got out of that is too is like whatever decision you make it the right decision. Like this is advice that I've been given. It's like
Yeah.
say, okay, I started this job and I realized, hey, it might not have been the right decision for me or like the optimal path in my head now. But can I, I ended up taking a sales job and I really wanted product, what have you. Can I integrate elements of product into my job? Can I make this
Yep.
something that works better for me? Or can I do something on the side, like start a passion project? Like I feel like having
Yeah.
that mindset of like, it'll be okay, we'll figure it out,
Yeah.
and that it's okay to fail. It's okay to
Yeah.
go off the beaten.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point because I think agreed. Like any role you have might seem very confined to like these are your tasks. You can always ask for more work, simply like build relationships with people in areas that you're passionate about. That's actually how I got my formal job at in the Chicago office was I didn't want to do operations and I was looking through the whole business of okay, like where would I want to do? And then I just started reaching out to people and was like, hey, I'm curious to learn more about your role. Do you have 15 minutes for a coffee? It's like a matter of like really going out of your way to build those relationships and learn. And then like that helps you make better decisions. But it shows like, yeah, that had nothing to do with my role, but I took that in my own hands to try to learn and like put myself in positions that I could like do different things after that opportunity. So yeah, I think that it's a matter of like make that space in whatever decision you make, like really like lean into it because even if you don't like it, there's a lot you can learn from it. And I think that like every experience really like, takes you to your next path. And I think I'll look back. I think both of us will look back 20 years from now and be like, wow, how did we get here? And I can't believe that like all these decisions I made actually got me here when I was skeptical it would. Like I think that's just kind of how things work. And I'm what 3 or 4 years out of college to where I'm seeing that on a very small scale. So I can only imagine how like as we progress through our careers after this, um, what it'll do. But I think yeah, advice for like college students trying to look for roles. I think really relationship building is like the biggest thing to me personally and in a position such as this. And I think it goes beyond, as we kind of touched on earlier, is not just like quantity of like I know 30 people in VC. It's like, okay, well, like, do you really know those people? And I think people are much more willing to support and like help you win and push you forward if they actually like you and feel like friends beyond just like, oh, we had a 15-minute conversation one time. So I think it's like a really like I've always really valued relationships and been like a big networker, but not in a transactional way, just in like, hey, like I like if I know you're interested in this, I'll send you an article in that space and I want to talk about it. So I think the relationships are like a big piece of advice is just like build those, but build those authentically. Don't just do it to say you're doing it. And then with that is like being young, and if you have mentors or people you're talking with, you feel like what value can you provide? Like you're the one asking for help. I think it's a matter of even just like simply asking like if there's anything it could ever do to help you, like please don't hesitate to reach out. Even if you have like nothing in your mind, like it just shows like the courtesy of like, yeah, like I want to be a supportive person. I want to be a resource, even if I don't see how. Um, and I think like the classic with networking is like give way more than you take. Like I think that's natural for most people of just like I want to help you succeed, and then maybe once in a blue moon I need help with something. But I think really like when it comes to the networking, it's a big thing, and it's a really important to like stay authentic and not be transactional because I think people see through that.
This is more enjoyable. It just makes your life better.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah, it's more
genuine,
fun. Yeah.
genuine relationship. Awesome. Well, I think this is a great place to wrap up. I've learned so much in the last hour, and it's so awesome to chat with you and hear and kind of just trade experiences. And I know a lot of other people will kind of get a lot of learning and a lot of takeaways too. So thanks so much, Sammie, for taking the time.
Yeah, of course.